Well, as people are still, I assume people will continue to come in here. We'll get started and go through some of the intro stuff that a lot of you have probably already heard multiple times. So yeah, if you're new to Civic Nebraska, this will be a really quick rundown. For those who know about us, thanks for sticking with us. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Great. Well, thanks for joining us. This is the second of our series about our Civic Health Index. In February, we launched the updated 2020 Civic Health Index, which covers different indicators of civic life, social connectedness being one of them. And so for the last session and this one, we have been talking about social connectedness, really as the foundation of how community is built. So last time we looked at social connectedness as a whole and how it's important to building community and to enjoying a place and to having a thriving community and how we can be intentional about building those connections. And this week, we wanted to focus on connectedness across backgrounds and diversity, which, as you'll see from some of the data and from our Civic Health Summit and those focus groups that happened at that event, came out as a priority across the state. So if you're new to Civic Nebraska, feel free to check us out online. Our mission is to create a modern and robust democracy for all Nebraskans. We have 3 program areas: youth civic leadership, civic health, which is where Amanda and I are representing, and then our voting rights initiatives. So we work across the state, and our Civic Health Index and some of our programs that you can see under there are focused in the civic health. Just a little bit about the Civic Health Index. This is our second time doing this. The first time was in 2015. We work with the National Conference on Citizenship, the Nebraska Public Policy Center, University of Nebraska Omaha Center for Public Affairs Research, with funding help from the Whites Family Foundation and Bryan Health Foundation. We're really appreciative of this. And Amanda, if you are able to get away from admitting people into the room and can drop the link to the digital index, you can peruse the Civic Health Index. We have it in digital format this year. When you're looking around on that site, you'll see our 4 pillars of civic health: social connectedness, confidence in institutions, community engagement, and political involvement. So communities that have these are more civically healthy and are more prepared to tackle pressing public challenges and have a better quality of life. So as I mentioned, today we are focusing again on social connectedness, and this time about connectedness across backgrounds. That was one of the things that we talked about in the index that came out as a priority. Was we had a lot of comments about, Nebraska can be a friendly place, but it can also, if you're on the outside, it can be hard to break into that in-group, to get in sort of to the center of knowing what's going on in the community, of being in the loop, of feeling like you're not an outsider. So that's something that's been felt from Omaha across communities in rural Nebraska. And that's something that we wanted to focus on this time, was building those cross-cutting ties that serve as links to information, opportunities, whether that's economic or opportunities to be involved, and a sense of belonging as well, that our communities can be home and be comfortable for all people. So real briefly, just touching on some of the data. Last week, we looked at these blue ones here, or last month, we looked at some of these blue ones of spending time with family and friends and neighbors frequently. Nebraska does very well compared to the nation. With most people spending time with family and friends frequently. Nebraskans spend more time with their neighbors than others in the nation. Where we lag is in spending time with people of different backgrounds, which is one of the prompting indicators for this conversation today. Just over half of people across the state spending time with people of a different background at least once a week. And then also, doing favors for neighbors, that can kind of be a proxy indicator too of how tight those linkages are. But diving in a little bit more into the data of spending time with people of a racial, ethnic, or cultural background different than yours, you can see that younger folks, younger adults tend to be spending time with people of different backgrounds more frequently than people in older age groups, with it being more infrequent or a larger not at all category of people spending time with those people of different racial, ethnic, or cultural background. Also, one thing that we wanted to point out is the difference in metro and non-metro Nebraska, with around 35% of non-metro respondents saying that they didn't spend any time with somebody of a racial, ethnic, or cultural background different than their own in non-metro Nebraska, where you have about 60% of people in metro Nebraska spending time with someone of a different background at least once a week. So I think the question of, or the, how we build these cross-cutting ties cuts across a lot of the priorities that came up from the Civic Health Index and from the discussions that we've had around it. That our infrastructure of connection, the events, associations, places, can be places that are comfortable for all people, that are connecting people of different backgrounds. Also, we've had a priority of who are these connectors and includers, and we have, I think, everybody that on our panel today is included in this category of being connectors and includers. So that's really great. And then explicitly, the bridging social connections, that individual work that we each have to do to build bridging connections in our own life, as well as the policy work that goes beyond, reaches to institutions and the groups that we're a part of, and our communities, that there are places that where opportunities are accessible to all people. So with that, we have double the amount of panelists that we had last month. So I'm just going to jump right into our conversation. I'm going to pass it off to my coworker, Nicolette Siegfried. She's our HR director at Civic Nebraska and also works from time to time with Inclusive Communities. And so she's going to be facilitating the discussion. We have Valerie Rodriguez with Empowering Families out of Scotts Bluff, Brent Cudley and Erica Kobza from Fremont, and Together for Fremont, and they're have been doing this work at a community level, but also are both within the educational system. And then Jocelyn Reyna from the Multicultural Coalition in Grand Island. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass it off to Nicolette. And welcome to all of our panelists. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that awesome introduction and a little bit of data to help guide our conversation today. I'm really excited to hear from our panelists. So the first thing I would like folks to share is just a little bit about what you're doing to build those connections in community, and just give us some examples of what that looks like.
So,
Nicolette, this is Marta. Who are you asking this question of those that are here or of the panelists?
Of our panelists. Yes. Thanks, Marta, for that clarification. Yep. And our panelists, I think we'll just hop on and we'll share just in kind of a conversational style. So whoever wants to start with that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, so my name's Brent Cudley and I'm with Together for Fremont in Fremont, Nebraska. And so we've been working on, I guess, social connectedness in some way since last summer. We started as an organization at about the beginning of June last year with the 4 core values of anti-racism, inclusivity, equity, and access. And one of the biggest things that we've been doing in this time has been working on or doing together talks. And we've been bringing people in from different backgrounds and having conversations that we do on Facebook Live. We've done a total of 16 of them. We're doing our 17th one this upcoming Sunday. And a lot of times we've been talking with former ELL students. Has been a good portion of the kids that are not kids, they're adults, but you know, sometimes as an educator, you still think of our adults as kids. But we've had former ELL students on. We've had others as well, and just kind of starting a conversation about our 4 core values. Erica, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's been pretty great to like learn the stories of people in our community and just hear about their experience and what that's been like. There are a lot of educators in Together for Fremont, and who and a lot of educators are the people who are watching our talks. And so as an educator, I'm a dean of students. I work at Fremont High School, specifically with the 10th grade class here. And so just being able to kind of understand and learn about the experience of people who have come through our school system and who have been English learners specifically, I think has helped me a little bit in my work here with students and families, because then when I've learned stories, you know, I'm able to ask questions of my students, like, I see that you're late to school all the time. What's going on? You know, and I learned a lot, like a lot of my students have jobs. They might not get off of work until 6:45 in the morning. I was just talking to a teacher about this morning. But I really wouldn't probably have thought to ask that unless I had learned a couple of stories from some of the people who have shared with us on our Together talks. Because for me, in my experience, you know, I had a job in high school, but I went to it after work, and, you know, I worked until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and that was it. But I have students who are working through the night, and they have to do that to support their families. So for us, it's just, for me anyways, it's helped in that social connectedness piece of just being more aware of everyone's potential experience here. It's been really great for that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Rodriguez with Empowering Families. Empowering Families, if you're not familiar with our organization, we are an organization that's working to build a stronger and more welcoming community through education, civic participation, and individual empowerment here in our community of Scottsbluff. My apologies if you can hear my puppy in the background. But some of the works that we're doing here is very much, as an organization, we definitely value centering the voices of our impacted community members. And we do so by building trust through authentic relationships. And so a lot of our work is, we build a lot of our trust, you know, when we're doing, you know, civic engagement and while we're canvassing and really learning about the stories of our community members, specifically within our precincts 3 and 4, which is primarily our Native American Hispanic immigrant community. And we partake in our local soup kitchens. And as well, that's where we hear a lot of, you know, we get to connect with our community members and really hear about the issues that are impacting our community, specifically in that part of our community. And, you know, in addition to all of this, you know, we like to partner with other agencies and organizations like Western Nebraska Community College. We recently, I was speaking earlier about how we recently put together a vaccine drive. And, you know, when we partner with organizations and bring students in, you know, oftentimes that's the first time that they're a part of, that they go to that side of town. Right. And we still have that language of like, you know, oh, it's that side of town. Right. It's not necessarily, so it's not inclusive at the moment. And we're working for it to be more inclusive. Right. And, you know, we hear our students, you know, that is their first experience, or even community members that, you know, when we do programming in our East Overland community, that is the first time that they've been on that side of town. You know, they highlight the delicious, we had pan dulce, right, on Saturday, and they didn't know about our local Mexican bakery, right? And so those are the experiences that we are bringing to our partners and our volunteers by doing programming within our East Overland community.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Reina. I'm with Multicultural Coalition here in Grand Island. And our mission is to empower individuals, embracing cultures and strengthening the community. There's a lot of things that go into exactly what we do. But I think one of the ways, we serve the newcomers here in Grand Island with whether it's a service that they need to be referred to another agency if they need a certain resource, or just get an acquaintance to the community itself. And I can think of one event specifically that we host every year called the Immigrant Story Walk. Last year was a little bit different, but in the past, the way we've done it, it's an event that we do to celebrate our new citizens. And so we invite them and their families, and then we also invite other people in the community as well as some of our donors. And so this is a space that we create where the donors and our clients get to interact with each other, where on a daily basis, that's probably not something common or something that they would be able to do. And so, they get to interact. The people that just became citizens talk about their journey and how they got here, and how it is for someone that has was born here, grew up in the US, and how their experience is. And so I think about that as well. And then we also, to prep people for citizenship, we also have volunteers that we pair up with the clients to study for the citizenship test. And again, that's another interaction where outside of this, the volunteer probably would have never made that connection or would have never had that relationship with that client if it wasn't for them volunteering and getting to know that person one-on-one.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about the work you're doing. Can you all share a little bit about explicitly why you do this work personally, and then also like what's at stake, right? Like why are these organizations working more broadly in the communities to do this work?
I'll let someone else go first while my puppy can.
I'll go. I think for me, it's important. We were actually having this discussion this morning because we have a big fundraiser coming up next month, and we were talking about like, what would I tell someone of why they should donate to us or why they should volunteer for organization. And personally for myself, as an immigrant, coming to the US, it was very different and a culture shock. And I think the work that we do of helping newcomers feel part of the community, I think that's very important. And I think a lot of times we're that main resource and the first contact they have. And also us being able to connect them. I mean, again, we don't have all the answers here, but we do have other connections in the community. So, whether someone is like, oh, I got this paper for my taxes, or I don't know how to do this, refer them to this person, or I want to apply for housing, or I want to apply for certain things for my kids, or I have questions about the school, like this is who we refer them to. And I think, again, I do this work because for myself, like I know what it's like to need help and to have that resource. And so I want to be able to keep helping the community, and not just like the minority community, but also teaching others about, what it's like to be an immigrant, what it's like to be a newcomer. And, a lot of times there's negative narratives about immigration. You mentioned the word immigration and people have all these thoughts. And I like sharing my story and other personal stories so that people make connections like these are people. This is not just one big issue, but these are personal stories and these are people in our community.
and I'll follow up on that. Jocelyn, that's really impressive what you're doing. And I appreciate all of those things. So one of the things so the reason, our why, I guess, is really to educate, advocate, and act for Together for Fremont. And what kind of started us, there were two major kind of things that were going on last summer. Part of it was with George Floyd and even some local issues that we had here in Fremont that made us think that we needed to be a voice and start a conversation of anti-racism. But when we were coming up with our 4 values, which was just like a spur of the moment conversation that took just a couple minutes, but really snowballed into something much bigger, we talked about inclusivity, equity, and access. And Erica, I remember, was very specifically talking about access. And that was not, at first I kind of looked at her like, I wonder, how does that fit into this? But as we've gone for the last year, everything we've done has really been about access. It's one of the things that we did last summer with COVID in full effect and us not having summer school here. We decided that it was really important that kids were still getting their free lunches in the summer, but many of the kids could not get access to. So in our community, there's just like in anyone, there's 23rd Street is a very busy street. Broad Street's very busy. And so for some of our kids to get to the food that was being served at Linden Elementary or Belfield or any other of our elementary schools, they might have to cross several different roads that would have been a very big challenge for them. So for us in that moment, our value of access became very real. We decided to start Feeding Fremont. And what we did was we connected about 70, I don't remember the numbers anymore. It was about 70 some volunteers with over 100 families. And we were able to each week deliver food to their houses from the school site. So the school provided the service, they provided the food. We didn't do any fundraising or anything like that. We simply connected volunteers to go to the school, pick up the food, and drive it to the student. So as far as the why for me, that's just an example of one of those things that's very tangible that you can see as very important.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Brent said, as educators, we always want to help. And I think that something that is important to me is knowing that the education of our students, our job as educators in the school community doesn't just stop at 3:10 when my students leave this building, right? They have a lot of needs and things like that happen out in the community. And so for us, it's important to be able to know what those needs are. And the only way that we can do that is if we can connect socially with our families and our students and figure out what those were. And that's what happened with Feeding Fremont. Another reason for me why this work is so important and something that I am very passionate about is that inclusivity is super important to me. So my brother he's gay. And so when he came out, he's 7 years younger than me, and he came out to me when he was about 21. And so he was really young. And I remember thinking, I wasn't surprised at all. I had always known that he was, even though he hadn't come out yet. But, for me, my perception of him, my love for him didn't change at all. But, it is a feeling that I had where I was like, I know that his life's going to be more difficult now. I know it's just going to be harder. There are going to be things that are harder for him. And so when I think about that in the community, I know that there are people who have aspects of their life that just make things harder, right? Whether it is your preference of who you love, or your religious identity, or your race, or your income level, or things like that. And so inclusivity is important. And I think that I want to know what the things are that make people, or erect a barrier from them or something that's put up in their way that makes them feel like they don't belong. I want to know what those things are, and I want to know, can I help to remove some of those barriers? Here at Fremont High School this year, our principal, Mr. Sikora, put in place our theme for the year, which is it's all about belonging. So it's you know, how can we help you feel like you belong? So it's be engaged, be a tiger, and belong. And so whenever we interact with students and things like that here in the office, and also with staff, because it's not just about our students, but it's also about staff. So like, what can I do to help you feel like you belong? Those are just really important conversations that we like to have. And we just always hope that we can make a difference somehow for someone. So.
For me, I do this work, it's very personal as well. As an immigrant to our Scottsbluff community, growing up being undocumented, and thankfully having the privilege to become a US citizen, however, not having those resources available was something that I noticed, and saw that a lot of our immigrant community members in our community really didn't have any resources whether it was just to learn more about, like, if they had immigration relief, or just the experiences that we were going through as immigrants to our community. And so that's very much the reason why I co-founded Empowering Families, so that we can provide resources for our immigrant community, and our people of color in Scottsbluff County. In addition to that, I do this work because I want to be able to create a welcoming community here in Scottsbluff. At the moment, we still see a lot of us versus them narrative. People still say, don't go to East Overland because you'll get shot, right? People will say, you just don't go to that side of town. And when they say that, they're talking about, people like myself. They're talking about our immigrant community. They're talking about our Native American community. They're talking about our Hispanic community, our Asian community, our community members that live in that neighborhood, in our community of Scottsbluff. And so for me, I want to be able to center the voices of our impacted community members, have them share their stories in front of, our city council, our leadership, so that they can be able to find alternatives and think about alternatives to be inclusive as leaders in our community. Right. And when they're thinking about decisions, that it is inclusive and it includes, all of us. In addition to that, our demographics are shifting, right? In rural Nebraska, we're seeing a demographic shift. In our Scottsbluff High School, it's already 50-50, 50% minority, 50% white. And so, we're already having these conversations, and we need to, create strategies that really ensure that, our public school system, our health centers, just our community in general, is welcoming and inclusive of all of our community members that live here.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing that personal why, but also what your organizations are doing. So can you talk about how you set the stage for bridging connections personally and within your communities? Like, what does that first step kind of look like?
I think, oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh.
Okay, so for us, I guess, for Together for Fremont, what that looked like for us, because this is fairly a new venture that Brent and I sort of took up, started last May. So what we did was we had that conversation where we just talked about what we value, right? And then we were curious to know who else in the community valued the same things that we do, right? And I think that I've always believed in the power of like collaboration and talking with one another and learning from each other. So we wanted to know who else believed the same things that we do. And so we made, I made this graphic in Canva, and mine says, so does Brent's does too. He's got it on the wall behind him. It says, I'm an instructional leader who values anti-racism, inclusivity, equity, and access. It has our Together for Fremont logo in the middle. And then it says, I believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. And so I made these images and we shared them on social media. And we just said, hey, if anybody would like one, we'll make you one too. And so for people who were in Fremont, we just said, what would you like it to say? And so some people requested theirs to say, I am a teacher who values, I am an advocate who values, I am a, community member who values. It could be anything. And then it just kind of got so crazy that people were requesting these who were out of our community. So then we would just take off the Together for Fremont part, but leave the rest of the logo in there with the hands. I think that was very visually appealing because it just looks inclusive. And then there were people from other states, and I don't even know, there was someone from another country too who wanted one, and we were just blown away. But what was cool about it was we just decided to have a meeting on like a Thursday night via Zoom, and a ton of people showed up. And for us, it was great. We were able to see who also believed in these values. And we were like, okay, so we're not alone. It just took a couple of people to say, hey, this is what we think is important. Anybody else? And that was kind of our initial bridge into the community, I guess.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, of course. Can you talk about how you set the stage for bridging connections personally and within your community?
Okay, thank you. I think I could tie this with the work I do here in multicultural and my personal life. And I think for me, it comes down to relationships. That's how connectivity works. I feel like I put myself in different leadership groups and different groups where not only am I sharing my story, but I'm also learning about others. And again, I think that those relationships are very important because once you get to know someone and you get to know their story, then you can ask them more about them and who they are. I used to work with someone who we were very different, and she would ask me questions. And even when she asked me, she was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to sound rude or racist, but you tell me, and I want to know this, and I'd be like, oh yeah, don't say that. Or maybe word it like this, but because we built that relationship, she was able to ask me those questions of like, why do people do this? Or even the food I would bring, she's like, why do you put this on this? Or, and I think the relationships are very important, and that's how you get to share your story and learn more about others. Because other than that, I think it's hard to, we want to say, we want to be inclusive. We want to have everyone get along, but like it starts with those relationships, and feeling comfortable with someone. Because like for me, I'm not going to just come in a group and just share my story. I got to test out like the waters and see how everyone feels about something. And then I'm like, okay, do I feel comfortable now to share my story, or do I hold back and maybe share it one-on-one with someone in the group that I feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I'd have to echo what, Erika and Jocelyn has said about the importance of conversations and relationships, but also respect. Oftentimes we may not see eye to eye, we may not agree on certain issues, but I think majority of the time what we can agree is the impact and the changes we want to create in our community, right? And so, for example, when we started empowering families, we didn't have a big relationship within our Native American community, and we have over 1,200, Lakota, Oglala, Rosebud Sioux, Native American in our community. And so, we took initiative that we were going to go to, our soup kitchens and build those relationships. And at first it was hard. At first, you know, they weren't so open with us and so forth. But now, you know, they say, Mija, come over here. You know, they're really open about, you know, their stories, because we've been able to build those relationships through trust and so forth. And they're not afraid to share with us the issues that they're facing. And, you know, by knowing, you know, their stories, the issues our community face, you know, personally, even within our Latino and Native American community, you know, within our Latino community, there's a lot of stereotypes about our Native American community. And so now that I have a relationship with a lot of our Native American community, I can go back to my community, to my Mexican, to my, you know, family, to my, you know, Hispanic community, and say, you know, these are the stories that I hear about our community. You know, come and join me and meet our community members. You know, we all, you know, in our life have struggled, have gone through, you know, something traumatic that has changed our lives. And, you know, oftentimes it's been a few people that have been there for us to provide resources, to provide that authentic relationship. And those people are the ones that, you know, have really created an impact on us. And for empowering families, like, we want to be that organization that makes an impact on an individual, right? And that by building our, you know, authentic relationships, we're able to then really turn that into policy changes within, you know, our local community and state community, because we built that trust within our community members.
So the only thing I would add to like how we set the stage for bridging connections was that once we at least stated our values out loud, once we did that, we were able to realize how many organizations and people were doing amazing things in Fremont. Fremont sometimes gets a bad rep for some different things that have, you know, racial issues and different things that have happened here in Fremont in the past and presently, quite honestly. But one of the things we really quickly learned was how many people are passionate in Fremont about the work that Erica and I, or the values that Erica and I shared. Real quickly, we learned about the Urban Tiger at Fremont Middle School. And then we replicated. So the Urban Tiger is a place where kids can go to get clothing right there in the middle school. So they don't have to go search in the community. They can find it right there in Fremont Middle School. So we had some people like Kristen Henkenius and Edie Ronhavi who were working on that. And then all of a sudden, and others, so I don't want to just limit it to them. I know there were many working on that. And then we could say, okay, let's do this at the high school as well. So that's when we created the hub, which has clothing and food and personal hygiene products and that type of thing. So we started to realize we weren't alone, and that this conversation, though we were putting it out there, had already started. And there was a multicultural inclusion council that we were able to connect with. And then we also realized that when we started feeding Fremont, that there were a lot of people working on the food issue in Fremont. So we were able to join with the COVID task force. And so we, I guess I'm taking it from a different angle, like we became more connected to some of these resources, therefore being able to help our students become more connected, and our educators here in town who've joined Together for Fremont were able to become more connected and just know, oh, okay, there's all these different groups. This is what's happening at the middle school. This is what's happening at the COVID task force. And so I feel like that was a really powerful thing. And so the staging of that was we just said out loud our values and kept saying them to make sure that people maybe realized they weren't alone in wanting to do this work. And also then people started reaching out to us so that they knew that we wanted to do this work as well.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing that. Can you share some of the roadblocks to success and how you've worked to overcome those, or how you're currently working to overcome those?
Sure. So we recently just had a conversation about this. So we've been, kind of like cooking along, doing these Facebook Lives with people who come and share their stories with us and also teach us about different things, different issues and things like that. And we had the Feeding Fremont project, and then we tried a project called T4F Rides, which is basically like Uber for kids. And because we have a lot of families with transportation issues. So we were like, maybe we can help with that, right? Kids can't access extracurricular activities because of transportation. So we partnered with Kiwanis here in town, and they were able to provide some volunteers who were willing to give rides to kids if they needed them to get to. We started with All City Chorus, and it's for like 4th grade students, okay? And we just couldn't like really get it off the ground. We actually ended up giving a ride to a couple kids to school one day because someone had heard we were doing this. So that was great. But what we found out was that, there's more to it than just the transportation issue. There were other barriers that we didn't really realize, like communication barriers. So how are we communicating with parents? I mean, even about the extracurricular opportunities. In one of our schools, for example, that we really tried to target, a lot of the parents are native Spanish speakers. Some of them also speak Quiche. And then in addition to that, they might even be illiterate. So sending a flyer home isn't going to help because they can't read it. And their kids are little, we're talking about elementary kids, so they don't know how to read yet either. And so that was one barrier that we didn't really anticipate, but that we learned about. We also learned about through talking with one of our guests on a Together talk. His name was Freddie Oriana. He talked to us about how sometimes the families, it's just a cultural difference where maybe they don't understand or see the value in getting involved in an extracurricular activity. So maybe they learn about the opportunity, but yet they don't know that it's important, if you can, to try to get your kids involved in something. And so, he's like, it's not that they are like lazy or don't want to take their kids or whatever. It's just they don't really understand why. So those were some barriers that we've encountered. And so we've recently been discussing ways that we can approach our projects differently, and maybe kind of break down some of those barriers. A lot of discussion around that recently. So did I miss anything, Brent, with that?
No, I think I think you nailed it. That was, we could anticipate some of those roadblocks, like the language thing. We knew, well, that's going to be an issue, but just, I guess we had to put ourselves out there, see if we could help with it. And then once we realized that one's probably not going anywhere, that's okay. Then let's just refocus on what we can help with. We are not an organization that gets money. We don't have funders. We don't want really to do that. So we're very much just a grassroots organization that is trying to do things for the community. So yeah, there's going to be some definite roadblocks there. But right now, it doesn't seem like money is the roadblock. It's other things. It's just like trying to figure out, with transportation, which is a huge issue in Fremont and probably many other places, is how can we do this? How can we help make sure that kids are able to get to the extracurriculars and that type of thing? And the other thing is like how, and Erica talked about this a little bit, but how can we really help like show the importance of biculturalism, like of understanding like here's some things about here's something about Fremont's culture that's important, or America's culture, and at the same time keep the things that are wonderful about the Mexican culture, Guatemalan, El Salvadorian culture, or wherever the student comes from, and really bring that to the top. So, educating kids about like, hey, it's really important to join in extracurriculars. That's important, but also at the same time not losing your own culture. So.
I was seeing if you were gonna go, Valeria. I think other, kind of, like we've mentioned, roadblocks is like the language barrier. I think I never noticed it because I speak English and Spanish, that a lot of the communication that is at the store or different places is English and Spanish. And for example, in Grand Island, we have a lot of our population who also speak Somali and Arabic, and I never, again, because I was privileged enough to know both languages, I never noticed that we were excluding other populations in our community. And I think that's definitely something that we've been working on, of getting a lot of things translated. And again, I think it goes back to relationships, right? We can post all this information in those languages, but is there relationships that we build with the clients that then they go and tell their friends like, hey, I really like this place, or they help me with this. That's how we get a lot of our clients. Again, we do, social media posts and stuff like that, but that's mostly, people can volunteer, our supporters, but our clients, it's word of mouth. And just having that, and understanding how, different cultures function and how relationships, are. And I think, just keep learning about that to keep providing those services to the community.
I think for our community of Scottsbluff, as an organization, as we're building relationships with, other agencies, other public administrators, we're starting to see a lack of cultural competence. And what I mean by that is, people telling us that they don't see nor believe in systemic racism and racial biases that exist within our community. As I've shared, for example, there was one time where I shared just, my story, and that I was a graduate from the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and I was told people like you go to college. And so we're like facing that here in our community of Scottsbluff, and this, we get dismissed, our experiences get dismissed, our experiences with discrimination gets dismissed by oftentimes it's occurred when it's been individuals in leadership. And so I think that in order for us to create change, we really need to educate our community, our leaders, of the history of racial biases within, public administration, within, the agencies that we work in, within, the history of, even within our own community, of racism and discrimination. And so I think right now, for us, I think that's definitely our biggest roadblock that we're coming up against. But, taking it in a positive way, even though it can be really hard when you get told comments like that, it can be really discouraging. But the work has to continue, right? Because if we're not going to do it, who else will, right? And as our community, increases, as we become more diverse, we need to, as I mentioned earlier, right, create strategies that ensures a welcoming and inclusive community. And so if I have to get told, do people like you go to college? Do people like you do this type of work 1,000 times? I'm going to continue to do this work, right? And continue to empower our community members and, uplift their stories and experiences so that we can create the community we want to see for, ourselves and our future generations.
Thank you all for sharing that, and Valeria for sharing that personal experience with this, and how you're willing to continue to do this work, even though it's really hard. I know all of you faced those challenges, and I think it's a testament to the work that you're all doing. So if someone wants to get involved in their community and social connectedness, and they want to do this work in their everyday lives, like what suggestions do you have for them? Like how can they support your work in the community?
I think I can go. I don't know. I think I saw someone had a question.
No, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Nicolette, Yeah, I've done a lot of work in cultural competence in social services as well as in for 11 and a half years, I worked for United Healthcare, and I was hired specifically to do that because they needed to diversify their staff, and because we were serving the Medicaid community at that time. And so our customer service reps really needed to learn some things if they were going to provide good service. So I like very much each of you have really done a lot of good work to open things up. But you're right in the fact that we need to do this on both sides. I think this is something that this country needs to recognize, that we need the immigrants. They're younger, they can fill positions that many of the non-minority folks are retiring, and they're not, growing in population. And if this country is going to be successful, we need to make sure that the immigrants who are coming here have the education, have the support to continue to make our country a fabulous country. And I tell you, my husband was in the service over 20 years, and we traveled the world. And I am telling you, this is the best country in the entire world. And the challenge that we have right now is to understand that the immigrants that are coming from all over places in the world, and particularly from South and Central America, that these are the folks, like for instance, the dreamers. These young people are highly educated, and they encounter the same kinds of things that Valerie and Jocelyn have been, or Valeria, have been experiencing. So I think it's time for the rest of us, and I'm Cuban descent, so I've been acculturated for many years because I was born here, and my mom was born here too in Florida. So I just think it's really important for those of the population that is not, at some point, your family came over as immigrants too. So, and some people faced more discrimination than others. And a lot of that has to do with skin color and stereotypes and all that other stuff. So I am very impressed with Brent, Erica, Valeria, and Jocelyn. What you are doing is extremely important. And, you're showing the way. Now for Fremont, this is my last comment. I don't want to, have to take over. But the fact is that there have been laws, and there was some really ugly stuff that happened in Fremont. So I really compliment Erica and Brent for the work you're doing, because it's a thankless job. And and I really am proud that you're doing that. But has any of those laws to not rent to immigrants and the attitudes that exist there, have any of those things been dealt with in terms of the leadership in Fremont? That's my question.
Yeah, so those laws are still on the books, and they attempted to have. So you're talking about the housing ordinance, where you need to prove your citizenship to rent a house in Fremont, and if you were to rent here, you have to go to the courthouse and pay like $5 or something like that to show that you are a citizen. It's they are still on the books, and I will tell you, Fremont. There, like I said before, there have been different issues that have been very divisive in Fremont.
Yes.
And there is,
that.
Yeah, and there are definitely a lot of people. You said that it's a challenge, but I will tell you, there's also a lot of wonderful people in Fremont who've been working very hard.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
So yeah, it's been.
But that's where civic engagement is important. Now, as soon as any of the Latinos become citizens, there should be right there somebody to register them to vote and to be aware. The League of Women Voters has a video that myself and another Latina and another Latina who's a volunteer with, two of them that are volunteers with that organization. And we made a tape in Spanish, why it's important to become civically engaged. the connection. And we're very lucky here in Nebraska because we have the legislature that is one house. We don't have the problems in other states where you have to go through two houses to get anything done. So we are really blessed in this state to be able to get involved civically. And you can do it with nonpartisan organizations. You don't have to necessarily join a party. You can work with Harlem Worker Center. You can work with the Latinx Center of the Midlands. You can do a lot of work. You can work with the church. I have a project that the Pope has come out with now for what is that called? For clean energy. And I'm trying to get some people connected with the groups that are doing this from the Latino churches. So I would love to send some of that to Valeria and Jocelyn. Are you two on the list for both this? Okay, I thought I'd seen you there. So yeah, I will have Rebecca send that out because the Catholic Church is really behind taking care of our planet.
Awesome.
Marta, that is a God-given thing. And if we don't take care of our planet, we're not going to have any place to live. I'm sorry, Nicolette, I get it.
No, that's okay. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I just want to make sure we're able to stay on time and see if anyone else has questions.
Or even comments. We need your input. When we say community, we mean community. So that's it.
I think to quickly answer your question, I think, again, the relationships, being intentional with the relationships that you have. And then also just recognizing the privilege that you have and that you can help others, lead that way. And my boss makes that analogy. She's a white woman, and she makes that analogy of how I can't remember exactly how she said it, like me as a Latina, I can stand on her shoulders, like she will help me get to that spot. Yes. And I think you have to remember that how Valeria was talking about systemic racism and how things have always been this way, and I use that as my advantage. If I know people or there's certain leaders that I'm like, okay, I'm going to use them to get in through this, because I myself, if I try to go there, they're not going to listen to me. So I'm like, I shouldn't be like that, but I was like,
right, but you're smart to do that because otherwise you don't get in.
Yes.
You just don't get in. And I have practiced getting in for years. I've been here in Nebraska over 50 years. And so, I think you have to love people anyway. I'll give you an example. I'm a member of Altrusa for over 30 years now, and that's a professional women's organization that does service in the community. And I love my Altrusa group. We're very diverse. So there was a woman, and she has since passed away, wonderful friend, and she said all kinds of racist things to me, and she loved me dearly. But I had to leave that piece out and love her back. And she would ask me some of the most ridiculous questions, but I know she meant it from her heart. She really didn't know. And so I loved her anyway. And we were great friends. And I felt bad for her because I know when she treated other non-majority culture people that way, they were angry with her. But I just knew that's how she was. And I loved her anyway. And I think that's the way to get these things done. I'll tell you about a group that I helped to start in Grand Island, and you may have heard of them. They are doing amazing work.
Oh, do you care? Yes. Sorry, I just want to make sure we are able to end on time.
I'm sorry.
No, you're just fine.
I want to put my phone number on the chat, and you can call me if you want to go further, okay?
That would be awesome if you want to share some information there. That'd be great. Daniel has a few closing items for us. And so I just want to make sure we're able to pass it back. And if folks have to leave, they're able to hear from him before we end.
Okay, thanks a lot. And thanks for the conversation. This has been really great. As Nicolette mentioned, we do have just a few things to mention before we close. I'm going to share my screen once more. but this part of this, the purpose of this webinar series is to just build this idea that this is something that can be done with intention and it can be done well, as our panelists have shown, that it's sometimes we lament that we don't have more connection or better civic health in our communities. And that's just the way it is. It's just part of the culture. But I think one of the things I've taken away from our panelists today is that they've rejected that idea, that there's something that we can do. So that's a part of what we're wanting to do as we continue these webinars. We also, on that Civic Health site, we have a self-assessment discussion guide that you can use with your community. You can also sign up for updates with us. Just one future event that we want to plug is our Strengthening Democracy Awards. And actually, Erica is one of our awardees, will be joining us that evening. And Eric Liu will be joining us as our keynote speaker that day. So that's on April 29th, 5 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Mountain. So with that, just so grateful to all of our panelists and to Nicolette, thank you for hosting, and to everybody for joining. We really appreciate you. Please get in touch and connect with each other to continue this work intentionally.